All right. Well, we either looked directly at most of the verses that were on the first page on Sunday, or spoke of them indirectly in some ways. I don't think we actually read Revelation. I don't know that we read any of them as far as actually reading them in class. But we mentioned several of them. I know we talked about Ecclesiastes. I know we talked about Revelation 4 and 5. And we talked a little bit about Romans chapter 1 and the fact that it is God's. Maybe we left off on that one. So I want to read this evening from Psalm 100 and from Romans 1 and Psalm 40. So I guess since two of them are in the Psalms, we'll read those two first. And I've got Psalm 100 open first, so let's start there, and then we'll go backwards to Psalm 40. But just looking at reasons why we worship. We talked about last lesson, knowing God, the importance of knowing God and how that really shapes our worship. But this is kind of an extension of that, the idea of the things that we know about God and various aspects of what motivates us to worship. And that's kind of really the point here is what motivates us to want to demonstrate the worthiness of God, maybe in our physical demonstration, like the idea of bowing down before, but more specifically in service. Psalm 100, we're just going to look at all 5 verses. Shout out praises to the Lord, all the earth. Worship the Lord with joy. Enter His presence with joyful singing. Acknowledge that the Lord is God. He made us and we belong to Him. We are His people, the sheep of His pasture. Enter His gates with thanksgiving and His courts with praise. Give Him thanks. Praise His name, for the Lord is good. His loyal love endures, and He is faithful throughout all generations. Short and sweet psalm, obviously a psalm about worship and praising God. What are some of the reasons specifically given in this text? Verse 3 and verse 5 especially, that lead the psalmist to worship, and therefore by extension could lead us to worship as well. Okay, He made us. So again, kind of like Revelation 4, He is the creator. He created us. He extends that further, and I think this is one of those cases of synonymous parallelism where it's kind of a form of Hebrew poetry and rhyming. But He says He made us and we belong to Him. And I think those two are not necessarily different sides of the coin. I think it's actually just a repetition using different words that reflect the same point. If God is the one who made us, then we belong to Him. I mean, ultimately, we've talked about before, everything in the universe belongs to God because He is the creator. He says to the Israelites, I don't need for you to give me anything. Everything already belongs to me. And so we have been made by Him, and therefore we belong to Him. But then it goes further, I think, and I do think there's a little bit of a difference in the way that it's reflected in the latter half of verse 3. Because what does He say? Okay, we are His people, the sheep of His pasture. And I do think that is a subtle shift. It's still, using the language of Exodus 19 and 1 Peter 2, the idea of being a chosen people for God. There's some sense in which you could relate that to the first half of verse 3. But as we were reflecting on it a minute ago, I almost view the first half of verse 3 as being a kind of, well, duh, God made us and therefore we belong to Him. But then furthermore, we are His people, the sheep of His pasture. And So it's more descriptive of a relationship instead of just the power he has over us or the right of ownership and claim because he made us. And so kind of a reflection of both Revelation 4 and Revelation 5. He is creator, but he's also redeemer. He made us, but he also wants to have a relationship with us. And so we see that in that particular verse. Then in verse 5, I think there are at least 3 reasons in my mind that are given that are reasons to worship God. We've talked a little about these, or at least alluded to them. Okay, the Lord is good. And we talked about last class period how he is holy, and so when it uses this idea of him being good, Jesus would say to the rich young ruler who came to him and said, "Good teacher," and he says, "Why do you call me good? There's only one who is good, that is God." And so the point that Jesus is making, and the point that I think the psalmist is making, is God is the only one who is truly all good. There's nothing bad about him, to use the flip side of that coin. There is nothing about God that can be described as bad. God is good. What else? Yes, ma'am, Joy.
I like the second one that says, his steadfast love endures forever, because it's kind of like saying it's steadfast and it's
Yeah. So, I mean, it's almost repeating the same thing, but there are reasons for that, for emphasis, to emphasize the point. So his steadfast love endures forever. And so he wants to emphasize the faithfulness of that. And I kind of just mentioned this last point, but he wants to emphasize how certain, how sure this love is. Brian, did you have something?
You just said it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he's emphasizing that it is a certainty. It's something we can be assured of. Yes, sir.
I like the way that NET puts it when it says his loyal love. And that
I did
really
too.
good, because if you think of the term loyal, it's like it sticks with you. It's
Yes.
not going to betray you. It's not going to go anywhere. And that's what, because you could ask the question, what does steadfast mean? That's what it means.
Right. It means to be loyal. It means to stick. Stick-to-itiveness would be a good made-up word that would fit in that concept too. So God's love is steadfast. It is something that endures. It is something you can be assured of. It is something that does not fade away in any sense. And part of the reason for that in 1 John 8 is, or 1 John 4 verse 8 is what? God is love. God is love. The reality is that it is who God is. To love, John would say in 1 John 4, for us to love other people is really just a reflection of the love that God has already demonstrated to us. And so, as he says again in 1 John 4, we know love because he first loved us. The way we really know what love looks like, or at least what it's supposed to look like and what it involves, is because God's already loved us. And that love is a steadfast, enduring certainty that we can be assured of in every sense. Yes, ma'am.
the other thing that makes me think of is it's not conditional.
Okay.
He loves us,
Yes,
period.
that's right.
Good, bad, whatever, however.
Right.
But it is unconditional.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's absolutely true. And I think sometimes we're uncomfortable with that because we think that means what we're saying is God's going to lavish us with all of his blessings no matter what we do. No, what we're saying is no matter who we are. In fact, the greatest demonstration of God's love was seen when people put his son to death. And so no matter who we are, no matter what we've done, God's love doesn't fade, it doesn't change, it's unwavering, it is steadfast, it endures forever. You can rest assured of that. You can be certain of that in every way. Yes, ma'am.
I was just going to say one more thing, is that you almost said it.
Uh-oh.
There are people who get the idea because they've had a horrible past
Right,
that they can never be,
right.
even by God. And that is not true.
There's no one on the planet, no amount of wickedness that you can pile up that would ever take away God's love from you, and the willingness that he has to demonstrate that, to bless and to pour that out. Now, He's not going to force you to accept His love, but His love is always there. It is unfading. It will not ever go away. And then the last point that He makes, I think in verse 5, is what? He's faithful through all generations. What is the idea of faithfulness? And typically, what do we think of when we think of faithfulness? He's faithful to do what? Okay, steadfast and sure, again, kind of a synonym to the words that were used in the earlier part of that with regard to His love. But is it just His love that is faithful and sure and steadfast? It is everything about His character, everything about who He is, everything about the characteristics that describe Him or that He demonstrates. All of those things, He is faithful in every one of them. He's faithful in His justice. He is faithful in His love. He is faithful in His promises. He is faithful through all generations. And so not only is He steadfast and sure when the psalmist wrote this, He was before the psalmist wrote it, and He will be forever and ever. Because again, we make a choice to do good things on the basis of what we read in the Word of God and by allowing Him to shape us and mold us. We make those choices. God is just good because that's who He is. I mean, He can't do wicked. He cannot do anything wicked or evil in any sense. And so He is steadfast and faithful through all generations. Those are all reasons to worship Him. His goodness that He's demonstrated to us in all of those ways, to the psalmist first and now to us, those are reasons to worship Him. Okay, in Romans chapter 1, we talked a little bit about this passage on... Yes, sorry. No, you're good.
I didn't think of this when I read this psalm before, but reading it now, verse 3, I think reveals another reason why we worship. We worship God because it's a response of who God is. But I think this also shows us that we worship because it helps us put into perspective who we are. And it's funny because we're simultaneously small and significant.
Yes.
Because we are so small in this universe, and we are so small in the presence of God that He made us. That helps us to know our place. But also, we are His sheep in His pasture. I look at that as we are His handiwork that He nurtures.
Right.
So even though we're small, we also have the perspective of we are significant in God's eyes. And so both of those are reasons to worship.
One of the many paradoxes found in Scripture, I mean, or at least apparent paradoxes in our minds, but I mean, that's true. And it's one of those things we've got to be careful about. We don't want to become arrogant because we recognize our significance through what God has done for us through Jesus Christ. But we also don't want to so diminish ourselves that, like Joy was talking about before, we can't see the worth that we have in the eyes of God. Yes, we are small, we are insignificant, we are tiny, and yet we hold a great place in the heart of God, to use an anthropomorphic term, in the heart of God and in His longing to provide for our well-being and our blessings both now and eternally. And so that's another good point. Yes, sir.
I'll just throw one thing out there about this psalm too. It starts out by saying, "Serve the Lord with gladness."
Yes.
Worship is not something that should be a drudgery to us. It is something that should be full of gladness, full of joy. Singing brings that joy out when we sing with the spirit and understanding.
Right.
And all of these things, I really like what was said about the significance that we have to God, even though we're small. But that's why. We know that we're small in the universe.
Right.
But at the same time, we're glad that He loves us enough, and we want to reciprocate that with the love He appreciates.
Well, and I mean, that's the thing again. The Psalms helps point this out, and you really have to kind of look. But the reality is all of the created world that God made ultimately is made for our well-being and our benefit. Everything. visible and invisible. I mean, it's pointed out by the Hebrew writer that the angels are faithful messengers of God to minister to whom? To us, to people. So they were created for us. They were created to be ministers of God, to serve people. And so everything in the created world was made for us. And again, that doesn't mean get excited about how great you are. It just means it really, if we keep it in the proper perspective, it just gives us a picture of how beautiful God's love is, that we who are so small and insignificant would have such a great place in His heart and in His purposes and in His will and in His plan. To use the words of David in Psalm 8, what is man that you're mindful of him? I mean, that God, the creator of the universe, would even look at me and think anything is amazing. That He would look at me and want me to be with Him eternally is magnificent. And how could you help but want to worship, to long to worship someone who loves you that much and has done that much? Okay, we're not going to take time to read Revelation or Romans 1, 19 through 23 or Psalm 40, verse 3. But a couple of the reasons that are there is, one, thanksgiving. They saw His invisible attributes that were obvious in the creation, and yet they didn't give thanks for Him and for all that He had done and created. In Psalm 40, one of the reasons to worship, I believe is found in that verse, is in order to share with others everything that He's done. So part of the reason why we worship God, part of the reason why we submit to and serve Him is because it allows us to give testimony to His goodness and His faithfulness and His character and all the things that He's done for us. And so it is our opportunity to evangelize, to share the gospel with other people. And I've said before, we tend to overcomplicate this process of personal evangelism, but it begins with personal. And when you have a relationship with people, it opens up the opportunity for them to see the difference, to talk about something Ethan talked about Sunday, to see the difference that exists in our lives and to ask us what makes that difference. And that is a perfect opportunity for us to share with them what God has done for us through Christ, and how that's what motivates us to live in the way that we live and shapes who we are. And so it gives us a chance to point that light that we reflect back to Him, and to show that it's all a result of Him, that we do these things because of Him and who He is and what He's done. Okay, so those are reasons why we worship. So looking at the back page of the questions and drawing in the fact that in the first lesson we talked about the fact that worship to God involves both an attitude of reverence and acts of service that are done as worship. How does understanding why others worshiped in Scripture, what does that tell us, understanding those things about why others worshiped, what does that tell us about the reasons we should worship? Or might be, and I put in quotation marks, called to worship. Led to worship. I mean, I think that's accurate terminology. I think as we talked about on Sunday, we could use really, in my mind, the weakest reason for worshiping, which is simply God commanded it, or because He is I kept saying the great and powerful, which made me want to follow it up with Oz. But He is the great and powerful Creator, and so we should worship Him because of that. To me, those are the weakest reasons to worship God. There are much more significant reasons to worship God. And we see those reflected in a lot of the passages that we've talked about. But that really should call us to worship. It should lead us to worship. It should cause us to want to worship. And so, how is that true? what are some of the ones we looked at that you said you thought, yeah, that explains how I'm motivated, or one of the reasons I'm motivated? And maybe there were multiple.
I would just think that since the Christians that we have knowledge of, the ways they worship, well, a lot of them worship directly with Jesus, so we'd want to emulate that as closely as possible.
Absolutely. So as a matter of following the examples that we see of faithful men and women who were before, what does all of this really mean to you? What are some things that you think of in your own life that are things that move you to worship? And I'll give you some examples from myself after you give me some. Yes, sir.
I think when I look at these examples and compare it to my life, they saw God's presence and God's actions as being very real.
Right.
It's just, it's almost, I mean, we've used the word involuntary in this class.
Yes.
But the absolute realness with which they viewed God and what God did, whether, when a prayer of theirs was answered, when a situation was changed, that a burden was lifted from them or a blessing was given to them, they saw that as God did that.
Right.
And I think it's hard for me, and it's hard for probably lots of people today, to go through life thinking God did that. God
Right.
is present here. God is real and with me right now. Like we get so used to, well, I caused so many things to happen, or
Right.
things just happened, that we kind of fictionalize God. It's not saying we don't believe in God, but we almost treat it like God's not really
That
here.
active.
God's
Right.
way over there.
Right, and I mean, and that's a good point. And sometimes I think it's that we're uncomfortable with using those things, and I think some of us might say that part of the reason is because it's obvious scripturally that that really was God causing that, because the scriptures say so. But I mean, to Andrew's point, I'm not sure that everybody who bore witness to those events necessarily knew the revelation or knew the things that we have written down for us to read now. And so what they were attributing to God was purely the circumstances that existed in their lives and the blessings that were coming. And so it wasn't necessarily that they could read it and say, oh yeah, that was definitely God's involvement. And so I don't think we have to necessarily know because God has spoken or it's written down that this was God's direct intervention. It's really a mindset and an appreciation for who God is. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think you look at some characters and you go, oh, well, God told them what he was doing.
Right.
God was actually talking to them, so of course they had this sense of the real presence of God. They heard his voice.
Right.
But then you have stories of people like sold by his brothers into slavery.
Joseph.
You have the story of Joseph where he didn't know anything that God was doing, and we have no record that God talked to him at any point through the whole process of his tortured life.
Nope.
And all the things that he went through, and yet he still said that God was present and working during those times and events. He
Right.
said it after the fact, but he
Right.
trusted God and trusted that God was real and present even when he wasn't hearing his voice.
Absolutely. And I mean, I would agree with that. I mean, I don't know how much direct interaction Joseph had with God. We know that he was given the interpretation of those visions, but beyond that, I don't know how much of the process and the plan was actually revealed to Joseph. My reading of the text indicates to me not much. And yet Joseph could still look back on his life and attribute the way things had panned out to being the working of God through the whole process, not just at the end, not just through the visions, not just through the preservation of Israel through the famine, but the entire process from beginning to end, Joseph saw as the active working of God in his life. And I think we need to have the relationship with God that leads us to think of things in that way, to attribute to God the blessings that we have, and in some cases, maybe even some of the trials that we face. Not that that was necessarily, he was intentionally and actively causing it, but certainly that he never left us and was with us through the whole thing, and that he utilized those events to help shape and mold us into who we've become. So, a good point. Okay, back to this idea. What are some things, what are occasions in your own life that you feel like are times when you are led to worship in some kind of specific sense? And it may not be any grand gesture. It may be something simple. It may be a thought or a frame of mind. Whatever. Yes, sir.
On a clear winter moonless night, when you see the stars, just a million stars, it seems
Yeah.
like, I want to worship.
Yeah, it led David to. It led David to ask the question we talked about before in Psalm 8. As he was out under the sky, probably shepherding sheep, and was able to see even more stars than we can because we've got all this light pollution. David looked up at the heavens and thought, what is man that you're mindful of him? Why do you even give us a thought? And so that is definitely an occasion that leads some people to worship. What else? Yes, sir.
I'm a very emotional guy, and I read like Psalm 40 and see David. So any type of emotion, whether it be sadness, happiness, scared, all that kind of stuff, like David says in verse 1 of chapter 40, and he turned toward me and heard my cry for help. He lifted me out of the watery pit, out of the slimy mud. He placed my feet on a rock and gave me a secure footing. He gave me a reason to sing this song. And you asked the question, based off these examples, how can we relate to that? Worship is emotional. And these emotional times, whether it be hard times or good times or change or any of that, David shows us that's the best time. That's a huge reason God gives us to worship him.
Yeah, we have, probably because of abuses in the world around us, we have downplayed the idea of emotionalism. But worship should be an emotional experience. It should stir things up in us because of the goodness of God and because of the grandeur of the things that he's done and his consideration for us. That ought to, move us to joyful singing, move us sometimes to tears. It should move us in a whole lot of different ways. And that can be true in things like what Jeff said, the witnessing of the stars on a moonless night, when you're outside, can be an occasion that stirs up feelings of awe and wonder at the God who made all of that. Ashley does a really good job with the girls with sunsets and rainbows and other things to look at those things and say, I really love the artist. And her idea is just to point them to the fact that as much as you enjoy looking at that, the beauty of that, God is the one who made those things. He's the one who fashioned. Now, did he make the sunset look the way that it did tonight directly? And it was his plan that that's how the sunset was going to look in Columbus, Indiana at this particular time. I don't know whether that's the case or not. I'm not going to say it's not. I don't know whether that's the case or not, but I know that he is the one who put all of that in motion, who made the laws of science what they are so that white light that is emitted from the sun is refracted in all the ways that it's refracted because of our atmosphere. God's the one who instilled that in the universe. And so when I look at that, I should be led to have awe and wonder at the God who made it. Number one, at the sheer power that's involved in putting a star like the sun in motion and causing it to put off enough heat that 94 million miles away we have enough heat to sustain life and to live the way that we live. All of those things are magnificent and wonderful, and it leads me to one of the things that in 2024, 2 years ago, when we had the eclipse, most of you know I was not very social that day. I spent a whole lot of time behind telescopes and binoculars looking up at the sky. And part of the reason was because I am absolutely floored by the fact that God would create the sun and the moon and the earth in such a way that when that event takes place, the sun is almost completely blocked out so that we experience a kind of twilight, and even the birds and the animals kind of freak out a little bit because they're not completely sure what's going on, but you can still catch that glimpse of the corona around the sun because we are just the perfect distance, and the sun is the perfect distance and size, and the moon is the perfect distance and size to cause all of those things to come together at just the right moment. It's incredible. I was talking to my mom about the eclipse and how excited I was about it. And she's like, yeah, I just don't see what the big deal is. Okay, I mean, some people don't. But to me, it's huge. I started looking after 2024's eclipse. I'm like, okay, where can I go to see the next one? And then they start talking about the one that's going to come, I don't remember how many years from now, that's going to be like 6 minutes long. And I'm thinking, oh, I hope I live to see that. And so, I mean, it's just, those things are magnificent. And Jeff talks about looking up at the sky to look through a telescope and see a galaxy or a star cluster with thousands, perhaps millions of stars in it that are so far away. It's like our sun is a relatively small star. And so as magnificent as God is and as powerful as He is to put that in motion, think about a star that makes the sun look like the earth looks next to the sun on a picture. And it's like He put that one there too, and all of them. And then He put them in orbit and motion so that they formed galaxies and galaxies revolving around galaxies, neighborhoods of galaxies. It's like He's just incredible. And I choose to believe, this is my opinion, that a lot of what we see in the world, God created it that way for us to not only be in awe of His power, but to just enjoy the beauty and the diversity and the glory of the things that He's made, just to enjoy them as being aesthetically pleasing and artistic and all of those kinds of things. So I think God created them. I think He made ice fog, not because it's dangerous and deadly, but because when you drive down Tally Road after ice fog and the sun is hitting the trees just right, they look like they're made of glass. That's beautiful. Okay, it's treacherous, but it's gorgeous. Snow, as much as as many of you hate snow, it is, number one, the only thing cold weather's good for. And when you've got a foot of snow on the ground and you can't go anywhere, and you look out your window and the trees are just, it's clinging to them and it's covering the ground and the rooftops and everything, it is spectacular. And I have to believe God made that so I could look at it and think, that is magnificent. And the God who made that must be even more magnificent than that. And so those things lead me to worship. What else? Throw out some other things. Yes, sir, Chip.
More of the opposite
Okay.
of Jeff. When I see just a completely dark sky with just like the one star, it makes me think like Jesus could come, at any time.
Right? Yeah, I mean, the other, one of the other ones that I look at is the power of a storm. People laugh at me, and my wife knows me well enough to know that most of the time when there's a storm, guess where I am? Outside watching it. Is it because I have a death wish? Is it because I don't respect the power that it has? No. It's because, again, when I look at that and the power of it, when I see a lightning bolt crash to the ground and hear the thunder, I think, again, God made all of that. And it is magnificent. And again, a reason to lead me to worship the genius and the glory of the Creator who made it. So there's just so many different things. The birth of a baby. How many would put that as a reason? And especially if the child is your own. My wife is someone is a blessing that I frequently look to God and thank God, thank you for this woman, and who continues to love me in spite of myself. And so, I mean, that is a gift of God, and the marriage that we share, and the children that are a part of us. All of those things are blessings from God and reasons to worship and to praise and honor Him. Yes, ma'am.
I've been practicing. I knew I was going to say this, but I'm trying not to. Answering prayer and healing an 8-year-old little girl from cancer.
Absolutely. Great reason to praise God. So many reasons. I mean, we could spend the next, how many weeks we got left? 10 weeks listing all of the reasons that God is worthy of praise and worthy of our worship, because there's so many, and some of them are perhaps we don't even think about them until they happen, and then we're led to worship. Because worship is ultimately a reflection of what we know about God, not only about His character and nature, but about what He has done, both past and present, as well as His future promises and the fact that we know He is faithful to that. All of those are things that should lead us to worship. Because that's all based on us knowing Him, what does that tell us that we should be actively doing? I know that's maybe... Okay. Okay. Absolutely. Okay. Because there's no other way to really know God except that He's revealed Himself to us, right? I mean, we can see His invisible attributes and His deity and the things that are created. But there's no other way to really know the depth of what God, how God thinks of us, what God has done for us, what God wants for us. There's no way to know that without looking at what He's revealed to us. And so we should hunger and thirst to know more about Him. And because the result is what? The better we know Him, what?
Better service we give out.
That's exactly right. The better our worship will be. And the more fervent it will be, and the more we will be motivated to worship. The more we know about Him, the more we will long to worship. And as Chet said, the better we will be able to serve in all of the ways that are necessary as a reflection of that worship. Okay, anything else about class? I'm going to try not to go over 5 minutes tonight. Maybe it was 8, I don't know. Anything else? Yes, sir.
Can I throw out something a little bit different than what we've been talking about?
Sure.
Me and my first wife was married 42 years. She passed away. I got a little bit discouraged. So I got to thinking, she's in a better place than what we are. She had the assurance before she died that God would reward her for that,
Right.
her life. And so that let me worship Him more active and more fervent.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a challenge. I mean, there are things we face that are challenging times that in the midst of it, we can't always see the blessing and the benefit and the hand of God. But the hope is that if we keep trusting in who He is and His faithfulness, that we'll eventually get there and be able to look back on some of that. And so, but again, that's why it's so critical to really know God. That is the root of our worship. Okay, appreciate all the comments and discussion. Questions are in the back, and Zach will be leading our study on Sunday unless we're snowed in.